Hey there, I'm Jackie Ferris. This week on the 302, we are at Rockwood checking out a really cool exhibit called The Nature of Gothic, which basically is a juxtaposition between tradition and modern graffiti. Get ready, the 302 is headed your way. Hey everybody, we are at Rockwood checking out an exhibit that might be surprising if you've ever been here before. It's called The Nature of Goth, and I'm joined now by the guest curator, Heather Mokhtadari. Heather, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So this is really surprising. You know, we're used to coming into this beautiful mansion and seeing items from the past, but this exhibit kind of has a twist. It's a surprise, sort of. Tell us about it.
Yes, so this is a site-responsive exhibition. The work of Past Present Projects is to bring contemporary art into historic spaces. We invited two artists. The space that we're currently in now has artwork by Leo Tukoski, who is a glass artist based in Brooklyn. And the room that we'll be going to next has artwork by Samara Weaver, who is local to Wilmington and just lives 5 minutes away.
So these items that they've created are inspired but updated of what you see in this Gothic mansion. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind what we're seeing.
Sure, I would say that both artists have really deep interests in the history of material culture and architecture. Leo Tukoski, whose work that we see here today in this space, is deeply influenced by Islamic art and architecture. The central chandelier that's hanging in this space is based on the form of a mosque lamp, which would be the type of lamp that hangs in a traditional mosque. And these were very popularly collected in the late 19th century, which is the period of the Rockwood Museum's mansion. And he's updated by drawing from the iconography of graffiti and street art and inscribing words that relate to Islamic culture.
When we look at the chandelier, you can see the writing, but unfortunately I can't really tell. It looks like one of the words is equal. I mean, he is drawing on inspirations of, you said, Islamic culture, but what is he trying to say with this piece?
Sure, so he's drawing from principles that relate to a practice called supreme mathematics, which is drawn from Islamic religious works, but was inspiring to a lot of 1980s and 90s rappers and hip hop artists. So it's really ingrained in that culture. And it's intentional that the words aren't immediately visible. If you think about the graffiti that you might see on the side of the I-95 corridor, the words aren't immediately legible. There's a sort of secret or encoded character to the words, and upon deeper reflection and observation, the words start to become legible.
Yeah, it's like you have to spend a little time with them, and then you say, oh, okay, it says equal, and then it looks like you have to say and look at it to kind of, take from it what you think it is. I guess we all are open to interpretation when we look at things like this. I wanted to ask you about the piece behind us. This is really, it's like, wow.
So this is actually a piece that has served as sort of a test piece or a study from Leo's studio, which is in Brooklyn, New York. And in it, he has spray painted and used stencils and used it as, you might think of like a sketch pad in his studio. When we were installing this exhibition, I felt like I wanted to bring Leo's work even more to the forefront and make it really obvious that this was a fresh artistic intervention. So I said, could we take these signs and plywood panels off your studio wall and install them in the mansion?
Yeah.
And he was very agreeable, and I think it's the perfect backdrop to complement the sculptural works that are in the show.
Absolutely, and it kind of, I'm curious about what part is the inspiration for each of the pieces, because not only do we have the painting and the chandelier, but there are vases which you traditionally think of as, you know, very high-end, very conservative, but he's really put his brand on it.
Yes, there are two vases in this room. One is blue and the other is pink. And these forms are known as the classic Veronese vase form. It's a form that had been sketched hundreds of years ago. And then in the 20th century, a Venetian glassblower created the form based on these centuries-old sketches. And Leo has created his own versions based on, or as an homage to, that tradition. And as you noted, he uses enamel marker to basically tag them, like you would see someone tagging a building and turning it into something that's completely fresh and contemporary.
Absolutely. So there are two vases that are in that mold, but he has some actual like sculptures that, you know, I don't know, one looks like a unicorn to me and the other one looks like an A. So talk to me about, you know, not just taking the traditional, but creating your own, you know, creation to go along with his inspiration.
So the forms that you're referencing are blown glass. He works in a hot shop with usually at least one assistant or partner in creating the blown forms. The A, for example, would have been made using a pontil with a gather of glass that's blown out, and he uses paddles to create the sides to the form and shape it into the A. And then they're brought into his studio, and that's where he does the cold working process, which involves cutting traditional forms. Oftentimes the motif of a star is used, as well as enameling them with tags. And A is something that we often see in his work. It refers to his tag name, which is Answer.
Okay, Answer, as in?
It's spelled A-N-S-E-R.
Okay, well, that's cool. Well, there are so many things that we are learning about this exhibit, The Nature of Gothic, and we're going to learn more when we return.
I'm Laura Earls with the Reed House and Gardens, and I love sharing these gardens with the 302.
Hey there, everybody. We have flipped our perspective. We are on the other side of the room checking out an exhibit at Rockwood Museum called The Nature of Gothic. And of course, I'm joined by the guest curator, Heather Mock-Tadari. Now, Heather, I want to ask you a little bit about this funky mirror over here.
I love that. It had to be part of the show. So it was in Leo Tukoski's studio, where we also brought a couple of paintings and a wall full of really experimental panels. And it's a funky experimental mirror piece, and the frame is painted in a color that matches the other colors in the exhibition perfectly, even though it wasn't created for this exhibition specifically. It felt like something that just had to be a part of this project.
Absolutely, and there's also a painting that kind of mirrors, a smaller painting that mirrors the larger one, kind of tying this room together.
Yeah, there's so much interconnectivity of the iconography and the forms in this room, and the painting you're referring to is the outline of the Veronese vase that we talked about. And it has another one of Leo's monikers, Tico, painted on it, so making his mark.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when we talk about making his mark, something unusual that you wouldn't think about in an exhibit is wallpaper.
Yes. So for past present projects, as I mentioned, we do site responsive exhibitions of contemporary art in historic spaces. And oftentimes that involves using a wallpaper because wallpapers are often some of the more visually interesting aspects of a historic house. So we decided to take the graffiti painted stop sign from Leo's wall panels and reproduce that as a Victorian style wallpaper.
Now I know that we're going to take a look at some of the work of Samara Weaver in the next room, but you know, how do you curate something like this and pull all of these elements together and show the, I guess, the juxtaposition of the space in which they're exhibited? Tell me about that.
There's about a year research process from when we conceive of an exhibition to when the artwork is installed. And over the course of that year, we held site visits with the artists, both here together. Both artists and myself have young children, so you know, the kids would be running around outside and we'd be in here taking measurements and sharing ideas. And Ryan Grover, the executive director of Rockwood, would also talk us through the site history that he knows so well, so the artists can base their work on not only the architecture, but the history of the people that lived on site here.
So you really have to, I guess, be very deliberate about it. Do you have a special piece in the exhibit? I mean, is there a backstory to something that just kind of like touches you, that you said we have to have this?
Well, we had to have Leo's A as part of the show, for sure. That's a piece that came from his studio, and it's really special. It relates to this Islamic alphabet that Leo is deeply interested in, as well as his tag name, Answer, and it's one of his classic forms that he's known for. So that's a piece that we came from his studio, but some works were created especially for the exhibition.
Like
one is the chandelier, which is simple mathematics, and there are also two oil lamps that were converted to electric, and they're called fresh candelabras. And for those, it's a mashup between oil lamps that were already in Rockwood's collection storage, and Leo retrofitted them with his own blown glass shades.
It's really amazing how well they go together. So when we're talking about all of these items, you guys are putting together a catalog with some extra content, right?
Yes, there's a Nature of Gothic catalog. It includes an introduction that provides insight on Rockwood's architectural history and the family that lived here, and then I wrote an essay for each of the artists.
That sounds really cool. It's a little bit extra. So, but there's even more. You guys are taking this exhibit deeper and really sitting with the community and telling them all about the backstory, because sometimes when you come, you go, oh, that's cool, but you don't really understand all the nuances that go into it. So you have talks, is that right?
Yes, so the first 3 Sundays of October at 3 p.m., I will be giving design history talks here. They will be on the aesthetic movement and the Gothic revival and the arts and crafts movement. So in addition to curating contemporary art, I am also a design historian and teach design history.
Oh, nice.
And I'm a firm believer in the interconnectivity of design from the past and present, and that bringing them together can make everything more meaningful and exciting.
So if somebody wants to come to one of these talks, do they have to reserve a space, or can they just show up, or?
They should register at rockwood.org.
Excellent. Well, Heather, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. We're going to go now and we're going to chat with one of the other artists in the next room, Samara Weaver. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Laura Ferville. I'm the curator at the Biggs Museum of American Art in Dover, Delaware, and I love the arts on the 302.
Hey everyone, we have moved to the dining room at Rockwood Mansion to talk a little bit more about the new exhibit, The Nature of Gothic. And I'm joined by one of the amazing artists, Samara Weaver, to tell us a little bit about her creations for this exhibit. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Well, we're excited to hear about your inspiration, and I gotta go right to the place settings are so unique. Talk to us a little bit about, what your inspiration was and what your process was.
Sure. Something that I think is so interesting about Rockwood is the idea that there were lots of lives lived here before we get to experience the space. And I wanted to experiment with and capture those people, experiences that we can't see anymore, but their energy and their touch is still here.
Yeah.
So I ended up using plant material and flowers and leaves, which I squished between 2 sheets of window glass and then fused it in the kiln so the glass melts together. And even though the plant material burns away, it leaves the ashes behind and you get this ghostly impression of the plants.
It's kind of like, dare I say, ectoplasm.
Yeah.
Kind of. It's really cool. And talk to me about just some of them are full sheets and some of them are, maybe part of it's missing or just part of it's coming through.
So I ended up using lots of different shapes, and a lot of them, some of them are square, a lot of them are like I actually broke the glass and got the shapes of the pieces from that. And I wanted to represent the different experiences and pieces of the people that were here because they're all different. They all have different qualities and parts to them and showing that through those differences.
And you also have a couple of what looks like clay impressions with glass kind of pouring over. Talk to me about those.
While I was doing my research for this, I was really interested in all of the different metalwork that's here. It's really beautiful. And the idea of actually getting an impression of what's here and having those patterns. So I took silicone impressions of those things and actually played with slumping the glass into those to get these glass representations of those pieces.
And one of the, molds is of the flute top of a candlestick. And so you had to handle that object. And talk to me a little bit about, as part of your process, there's research and everything. What was it like to deal with this object that was, 100 years old in your creative process?
It's really interesting to me to actually get to handle parts of the collection and be able to work so closely with Rockwood to use these pieces, because a lot of times in a museum you don't get to do stuff like that.
Don't touch it. Yeah.
So Rockwood was really wonderful about explaining how to actually handle those things and what materials we could use. And as long as we were careful, we could do that, which was really great. So I had to have gloves on so I didn't leave the oils from my fingers on those pieces, but it was so wonderful and amazing to get to actually touch them.
Yeah, so let's talk about the windows. It's kind of like a rip in the time continual, the pieces of glass on the window. What were you thinking in terms of, what was your inspiration for that?
So with the pieces on the windows, I wanted to make these little moments that drew your attention away, that you had to kind of search for. You had to do a little bit of work to get to experience that piece. All the pieces on the table are very much laid out for you. It's very clear where they are. But the pieces on the window, you have to kind of
pay attention or you miss it.
You could easily miss it if you're not being curious and looking around.
It's kind of cool because it frames, when you look outside, there's this grand lawn and you see this and it kind of melds the two worlds together. So when you walk in though, the thing that really stands out, of course, is this, is it a silk runner or what is it here?
It's actually trace paper. So my background's in architecture. I have my master's in architecture. And so one of the materials I used all the time was architectural trace paper. A lot of my work is using watercolors and architectural trace. And recently I started exploring doing body prints as part of the series I'm working on to explore me as a mother, taking back my body for myself.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting in how it connected with the glass pieces and them representing these kind of temporal moments, because I'm capturing pieces of myself that will never exactly be the same again, and making a permanent thing that has these temporal things embodied in it.
And it kind of adds to the whole, we talk about the nature of Gothic. I mean, it's beautiful and yet it's haunting in a way. You know what I mean?
Yes, it's a little bit eerie. There's the idea of the women that came before in this space and all of the work and service that they provided, and that kind of being laid out in the center of the table.
So you have quite a following on Instagram. Tell us what we can see on Instagram and what your handle is.
Yes, of course. So my handle is Samara, Samara, C Weaver, Weaver. And I do a lot of different things. I work in a lot of different mediums. I do ceramics. I've done plates for a new restaurant in Trolley. I do glass work. I do a lot of fine artwork. I actually have some of my what I call sculptural watercolors currently at Winterthur Museum.
In Transformations, which we're doing a show on Transformations.
Which is exciting. And so you can see all of that stuff. I am going to be offering the body prints on my website for sale as well soon, which is artbysamaraweaver.com. So if you want to see what I'm up to, going to my Instagram is definitely the place to see my day-to-day making happening.
Sure. Well, Samara, thank you so much for joining us and talking about your process and all of these beautiful pieces. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. It was our pleasure. We'll be right back. Aren't these exhibits cool? Well, if you come out to check them out, make sure you take a picture and share it with us on Facebook. Now, here are a couple of other things you might want to check into. For more information on the events at Rockwood or anything in Newcastle, make sure you visit newcastlede.gov. That'll do it for this week's episode of The 302. Make sure you follow us on Facebook for behind-the-scenes content you're just not going to get anywhere else. We're going to leave you now with a beauty shot of the grounds here at Rockwood. Until next time, I'm Jackie Ferris. Tell them you saw it on The 302.